folks, welcome back to the EDM studio. It's been a while and I'm excited to be back. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite effects, and that is delay. But before I do that, I just wanted to say really quickly, this is sort of a labor of love and a real passion of mine. I don't think that it's ever going to be, a full-time job or a business, and that's really my focus right now, is my job and focusing on a business. But I really appreciated the comments that I got on a couple of my older videos encouraging me to keep going. So I'm going to do what I can to at least make a few more videos and share some of the knowledge and my passion for electronic music, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. So today we're talking about delay, and in order to really understand delay, I thought the best way to explain it was in these good old-fashioned block diagrams, straight out of my electrical engineering textbooks from college. I'm trying to explain this on a sort of technical level and then also a more intuitive level. So regardless of whether this part makes sense to you, I think we can still understand the other parts of delay, but I think this is a good place to start. The way block diagrams work, and particularly when we're talking about digital signals, is that each one of these lines kind of represents a pathway for the digital signal to travel. So you can see here in the diagram for how a delay effect works, we have this one pathway that literally just goes from the input to the output, and these plus signs indicate that we are summing the signals from the two inputs together to form the output. So one pathway is just directly from input to output. We also have the delayed pathway, and we have this big block here. So what that really represents is we are going to record the input and then play it back after some delayed period. So in this really contrived example, I've set it up as though we have an input signal that is just one oscillation of a triangle wave. And what the delay does is it then takes this triangle wave and it shifts it by a delay unit. The other part of delay is this amplification and then a feedback effect. So you can think about amplification. This is pretty straightforward, and I've talked about this in other videos, but it is a multiplier on how intense the sound signal is. And in my drawn diagram, let's assume that this actually attenuates the signal by, say, 50%. So what we end up with is the input shrunken in amplitude by 50% and then delayed by our delay unit. And that path goes to the output. But we also have this other pathway that feeds things back. And a real world example of feedback is when you're playing your guitar. You play a note and it comes out of the amp, but then your pickups actually pick up the signal that's coming out of your amplifier. So the signal goes back through your guitar into the amp, back out the speaker, back through your guitar, and just keeps repeating. And the problem with that is that if this amplification is greater than 100%, you get a signal that just grows and grows and grows to the point where it makes that really loud, annoying sound. So for the purposes of, other than punk rock or whatever, you want this amplification to be some factor that's less than 100% so that your signal will die out over time. And that's really what I'm indicating here. So you can think about, we have your initial signal, we have your attenuated signal that's delayed, but then because of this feedback, the signal gets attenuated by 50% yet again and delayed again. So this signal is then 2 delay units and with an amplitude of 1/4 of the original signal. And so on and so forth. So there's actually another one that then occurs at a 3x delay unit. And if you think about then what the signal will look like when we add all of these together, it's sort of this string, and you get this echo effect. It sounds like kind of like a boom, 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 boom. If that makes sense. So this is the electrical engineering picture of what delay looks like. Let's jump into Logic and see what the kind of more intuitive musical interpretation of this is. Alright, so here we are in Logic, and I've got two patches that are both wired up through a delay. In this case I'm using the tape delay. There are a number of different delay effects that you can use in Logic, but they all operate on more or less the same principles. So I'm using the tape delay. I thought I'd just really quickly walk through some of the features of the tape delay that are built on top of just the standard block diagram that we talked about. So the first thing you'll notice is over here we have a dry-wet output selector, and you'll see this on almost all of the effects in Logic, but basically what this allows you to do is mix between the dry signal, which is the one that doesn't go through your effect, with the wet signal, which is the signal that does go through your effect. So rather than just being a binary on-off, this allows you to mix them proportionally. In this section we've got a bunch of effects related to oscillators. And there are two real effects here. The first is the LFO, the low frequency oscillator effect, and then we also have the flutter effect. The LFO effect is modulating the delay time. So it actually can, over time, oscillate back and forth. The rate controls how quickly it oscillates back and forth, and the depth controls how intense the oscillation is. Flutter is kind of similar, and you might remember, if you're as old as I am, that back in the day we used to listen to music on analog magnetic tapes, and over time the tapes would degrade, so you'd get this effect where it would kind of speed up and slow down and also affect the pitch. So that's what Flutter is trying to imitate. It's actually possible to build a delay unit entirely out of analog tape, and that's what the Flutter effect is. So just like with the LFO, the flutter rate is the rate at which the pitch and tempo oscillate, and then the intensity is the depth with which it oscillates. Now if you use these at a higher frequency, sometimes you get some weird artifacts in your signal, and that's where this smoothing effect comes in. This basically just smooths out your signal so that you don't get those weird effects, although in some cases, as I'll show you in a minute, you might actually want those because they can create some kind of interesting dynamics. The last effect that they give you should look familiar if you've seen my video on filters. So this is a bandpass filter, and the low cut allows you to change the cutoff frequency of the high pass filter. The high cut allows you to change the cutoff frequency of the low pass filter. So those are all effects built on top of the delay effect. But what you're really concerned with is this section up here, and this is what we were just talking about. And this is basically the delay time and the amplitude of the feedback. So let's begin with the delay time. There are several ways that you can change this. You can actually set it in terms of milliseconds, or you can set it in terms of a note value and a tempo, which allows you to also calculate a delay time. By using the sync button, you can sync it with your project tempo, which gives it a bit more musicality. And then down here you can set it to a whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth, and 16th. And we didn't talk about this because it's a little bit more complex than the block diagram could illustrate, but there's also this groove setting. And what that allows you to do is it actually changes the delay based on how many times it has echoed. So a groove setting of 50% means that each echo will be an equivalent length, but if you put it less than 50%, the third echo will be closer to the second than the second was to the first, and so on. And then greater than 50% is the opposite. So there's some other interesting things you can do here with the delay unit. Then over here, we can control the amplitude of the feedback. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting about this is that the 50% mark is actually the equivalent of the 100% mark in my block diagram, because this is implemented in a slightly different way where the signals actually overlap. So if you set it to greater than 50%, you'll get a increasing feedback, and less than 50% you'll get a decay. And then there's also this freeze button over here. That's not too fancy. All that does is it actually just keeps the sample that is in your feedback loop the same until you release the freeze button. So with that, let's give it a shot and see what this actually sounds like. I've got a synth queued up here. And by the way, one of the reasons that I love delay is that I kind of got into electronic music in the late 90s, early 2000s, when it was all about this trancy sound, and almost all of those tracks used delay to give it this driving shuffle pattern behind the music. So this is kind of standard pluck type sound, and then if we start increasing the wet portion of the signal, you'll hear the delay come in. Right, so you can hear this echo. You can speed it up by changing the delay time to an eighth note. We can increase the time that it takes for the signal to delay by increasing the feedback percentage. We can create some interesting effects using flutter and LFO. So this will kind of give it almost a sci-fi type sound. See if you can give it some depth too. Right, oh, it's because of the high-pass filter there. So interestingly, you can hear these flutter effects much more at higher frequencies. Notice when we move the cutoff frequency down, you don't hear it nearly as much as if we put it up high, right? So you can get some really weird sci-fi effects there. And the last thing I want to show is that we can actually get feedback just like on a guitar by increasing the feedback percentage. So generally you don't want to do that, but it's kind of an interesting effect of this model that we built. So those are really all the parameters, and that's really all I wanted to talk about in terms of technical and even musically. But I actually put together a track here that, or at least I tried to imitate an old school track that I used to listen to quite a bit. I thought this would be kind of fun since now people are actually commenting on my videos. So I thought maybe the first person to comment on this video with the name of this track, the original name of this track, I will send a piece of 90s rave memorabilia to in the mail. So, but I thought this was kind of interesting because we can, by tweaking the delay effect and also by messing around with these cutoffs, we can get some really cool sounds that imitate that sound that I'm really nostalgic for, and some of you probably are as well. So here we go. I'll just mess around with this for a little bit, and then we'll call it a day. Good one, guys. That is delay.